Usually when we talk about like a medical diagnosis, there's this underlying expectation of precision. It's almost like engineering.
Yeah, totally. It's very cut and dry.
Right. Like you fall off a bike, you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line right across the bone, and the doctor just points at the screen and says, well, there it is.
It's binary. It's either broken or it's not broken.
Exactly. It's clean.
Yeah.
And, it's comforting in a way. We like things to be visible. We like to be able to just categorize the danger.
Right, because if you can see it on a screen, you can treat it, you can just put a cast on it and fix it.
But then you step into the world of neurodevelopment or, systemic trauma, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just totally useless. You're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is entirely murky.
Oh, absolutely. The indicators are all over the place.
And I want you to hold on to that feeling of disorientation for a second, that distinct feeling of the ground shifting beneath your feet, where you aren't quite sure what you're looking at anymore. Because today, for this deep dive, we are tackling a concept that flips everything you probably assume about safety completely upside down. We are talking about serial kidnappers.
And right there, I think we have to just pause and reset the expectation.
We really do. Because, erase whatever image you just conjured up in your head. We are not talking about the old trope of strangers lurking in windowless vans outside a playground.
Right. We aren't doing a standard true crime profile of like a lone predator or something.
No, not at all. Today's stack of documents presents us with two radically different but deeply and honestly terrifyingly intertwined definitions of what a serial kidnapper actually looks like in practice.
Neither of which you're going to find in, a standard criminology textbook.
Definitely not. So the first definition we're going to explore is an accusation aimed squarely at the government. It's the allegation that the state bureaucracy itself, so Child Protective Services, county judges, state commissioners, that they operate as a literal cartel.
A cartel that systematically, quote-unquote, kidnaps children?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
To trigger massive, lucrative pipelines of federal funding.
And then the second definition we're parsing through today is the allegation of a multi-generational, highly secretive religious cult operating right here in the United States.
Which is just a wild shift.
It really is. It's a group accused of physically relocating vulnerable children to isolated desert compounds, utilizing severe, calculated psychological abuse. And here is the really vital connection between the two definitions, weaponizing that very same state bureaucracy to legally steal children from anyone who dares to defect from their ranks.
Right, they basically use the government as a weapon. So to map all of this out, we are pulling from a massive and honestly overwhelming cache of documents. We've got transcripts of passionate public hearings at county commission meetings. We have deeply disturbing open letters posted as videos.
There's a formal psychological evaluation conducted by a clinical psychologist, too.
Yeah, and highly detailed minute-by-minute Waco Police Department dispatch logs. We've got court orders, and we have official Freedom of Information Act requests.
There's a profound amount of data, and I think it's crucial we set the ground rules for how we are handling this before we go any further.
Absolutely. The disclaimer here is huge.
Because the material we are analyzing today contains highly volatile, politically charged, and extremely severe criminal allegations. These accusations are directed at government agencies, local law enforcement, and private individuals.
From all sides of the political spectrum, too.
Exactly. So it's important to understand that we are navigating this as impartial guides. We aren't endorsing these viewpoints, and we aren't trying to act as a judge or jury regarding the legal realities of these claims.
Right. We are not taking sides.
No. Our goal today is just to map out this wild narrative, to synthesize the claims exactly as they are presented in the specific stack of source material, and to understand the mechanics of what is being alleged.
We're trying to understand how all these massive gears connect, because our ultimate mission for this deep dive is to unravel the dizzying saga of one specific family caught in the absolute dead center of this storm.
The Hanks family.
Right. We are following the paper trail of Micah, Rochelle, and their 9-year-old daughter, Grace. We're going to figure out how a seemingly law-abiding family found their quiet suburban home raided by a SWAT team while exploring these profound accusations of systemic and cult-based child theft.
So let's start with the macro view.
Yeah, let's start big. The overarching accusation that the government itself is operating as the ultimate serial kidnapper.
We can see this argument laid out explicitly in a transcript from a public address to the Shelby County, Alabama commissioners. The speaker is an individual identified as Jessica Saxton.
And right out of the gate, she presents a really chilling thesis to the elected officials sitting in that room.
She claims, unequivocally, that children are being actively removed from fit, loving, healthy families. And she is very careful to state that this is not happening because of abuse and not because the children are in any actual danger.
No, she goes right for the financial motive. She uses the phrase, 100% just for profit.
Yes. She points directly to codified federal funding mechanisms. Specifically, she names Title 4V, Title 4E, and Title 4VB of the Social Security Act.
Okay, let's unpack this, because throwing around Roman numerals can glaze people's eyes over really fast.
Yeah.
But this is the actual engine of her entire argument. How does Title 4 funding actually work in theory, and how is she claiming it works in practice?
Well, in theory, these are federal safety nets. So Title 4B, for instance, provides federal funding to states for foster care maintenance and adoption assistance.
Okay, so if a state has to take a kid, they get help paying for it.
Right. If a state has to take a child into custody to protect them, the federal government helps subsidize the immense cost of housing and caring for that child. Title 4VD relates to child support enforcement, helping states track down non-custodial parents to ensure they provide financial support.
And what about IVB?
Title IVB provides grants for child welfare services that are aimed at keeping families together.
So the intended design is really just to alleviate the financial burden on local municipalities when a crisis happens. Like, it's supposed to be a good thing.
Exactly. But in the narrative presented by Saxton, these federal funding streams are not safety nets at all. She claims they're perverse financial incentives.
Oh, wow. So she's saying they actually encourage taking kids.
Yeah, the allegation she makes to the commissioners is that states and counties receive a financial bounty every time they remove a child and place them into state custody, or every time they enforce what she calls unlawful child support.
That makes me think of those terrifying stories you hear about perverse incentive structures in other industries, like a hospital getting paid a massive uncapped bonus for every cardiac surgery they perform.
Which is a terrifying thought.
Right. If that's the underlying financial structure, it creates this terrifying, dark incentive to perform unnecessary surgeries just to keep the lights on and the profits up. She is arguing that if a bureaucracy's budget inherently relies on intervening, that reliance completely corrupts the definition of protection.
That is the exact attention she is highlighting for the commissioners. She tells them that the federal pipeline of money has turned children into nothing but a financial commodity.
A financial commodity, that is heavy.
But she doesn't stop at a moral or philosophical argument. She escalates this into a severe legal threat against the officials in the room. She serves the commissioners right there during the public meeting with affidavits of criminal complaints.
Yeah, she says she has affidavits against at least 5 judges in the county. And the legal artillery she uses is incredibly heavy. She isn't accusing them of, malpractice or negligence.
No, she goes much further.
She accuses them of ICOCA violations, emoluments clause violations, and something called misprision of felony.
We really need to look at the mechanics of why she chose those specific terms. Let's start with ICO. That stands for the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. It was drafted and implemented specifically to take down the mafia.
Right, it's designed to prosecute the boss who orders the crime, even if he never touches the contraband himself.
Precisely. It allows prosecutors to try individuals not just for isolated crimes, but for participating in an ongoing criminal enterprise.
So by invoking ICO in a county commission meeting, the speaker is actively attempting to reframe the entire child protective bureaucracy. So the social workers, the lawyers, the judges. She's framing them as an organized crime syndicate.
She is arguing that they are, quite literally, serial kidnappers operating under the color of law, moving children through a system purely to trigger federal payouts that fund their own salaries and county budgets.
And what about the emoluments clause? Usually when that pops up in the news, we hear it in relation to presidents or federal politicians taking gifts from foreign kings or diplomats. How on earth does she apply that to a local county judge?
Well, an emolument is essentially any profit, salary, or fee derived from an office or employment. In her framework, she's arguing that by participating in a system that takes federal money in exchange for what she views as unconstitutionally seizing children, these judges are receiving an illegal emolument.
So they're profiting corruptly from their office.
Exactly. But the most pointed immediate threat she makes to the county commissioners themselves is under 18 U.S.C. Section 4, which is misprision of felony.
Okay, what is the exact mechanism of misprision of felony? Because that sounds really obscure.
It's a very specific federal law. It essentially states that if you have actual knowledge that a federal felony has been committed and you conceal it, or you fail to report it to the proper authorities, you are committing a felony yourself.
Oh, I see. So she's looking right at the people who hold the county purse strings and saying, I am telling you on the record right now that your judges and your child protective workers are committing the federal felony of kidnapping. And now that you know, by continuing to write their checks and allocate funds to them, you are legally complicit in a criminal conspiracy.
That is the exact trap she is trying to set for them. She tells them that ignoring her is no longer a legal option. She demands they immediately withhold all county funding from these departments.
And she argues that because these child removals are happening without due process, without jury trials, and without a preponderance of evidence, parents are basically deemed guilty until proven innocent by a system that needs them to be guilty to balance its budget.
Which is a really grim picture. The impact of this rhetoric, whether you believe it or not, is staggering to consider.
It really is. If these claims are believed by a community, if this narrative takes root, it entirely erodes the social contract. In this paradigm, CPS workers aren't seen as overworked social workers trying to navigate impossible situations to save abused kids. They are seen as bounty hunters.
And the judges aren't impartial arbiters weighing evidence. They are cartel bosses rubber-stamping the theft of human beings to keep the county budget flush.
Which is the perfect pivot to the core of our source material. We have this massive macro-level systemic accusation of state-sponsored kidnapping. But what happens when that abstract system collides with a real family?
Right. To understand the mechanics of how this bureaucracy operates on the ground, the sources take us away from an Alabama commission meeting and zoom us all the way in on McLennan County, Texas.
We are going to look at a house on Jackal Drive in a town called Lorena. Let's introduce the actual targets of this deep dive, the Hanks family.
According to a document in our sources titled Executive Brief, Micah Hanks, Rochelle Hanks, and their 9-year-old daughter, Grace, were, for all intents and purposes, a completely normal, law-abiding family.
The brief states they were community active. They had absolutely no criminal history. And crucially, there had never been a single police call for service to their home. Ever.
They were living quietly under the radar until August 8th, 2022.
So what happens on August 8th?
Well, our sources include a highly detailed CPS investigation timeline. And according to that timeline, on August 8th, a Department of Family and Protective Services investigator named Christopher McEwen receives a referral regarding the Hanks family.
And the allegations in this referral are not minor. It's not, a neighbor complaining that the kids are playing in the street too late.
No, these are extremely severe. The report alleges severe ongoing domestic violence between Micah and Rochelle. It claims both parents are actively using methamphetamines and heroin.
It claims there is no electricity or running water in the house. And it paints this horrifying, almost Dickensian picture of the mother and the 9-year-old daughter having to beg neighbors for food and water just to survive.
Now, any system designed to protect children has to take those allegations seriously.
Of course.
Those are life or death claims that demand immediate, robust investigation. And what is fascinating about our document stack is that we don't have to guess how the investigation unfolded. We can trace the exact paper trail.
Yep. We have the Waco Police Department computer-aided dispatch logs, the CAD logs, and the formal police incident reports. For context, a CAD log is the raw data of an emergency response. It tracks the exact seconds an officer's dispatch, their radio traffic, their notes from the scene.
It's the unfiltered administrative heartbeat of the police department.
Exactly. And when you look at these logs, the paper trail immediately starts to contradict itself. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Let's look at Waco PD Incident Report 22-13023, filed by Officer Gary Worsham. The report details the origin of the initial complaint. The information didn't come from a teacher or a doctor. It came through a friend and neighbor named Jacqueline Eastham.
Okay, so Jacqueline Eastham, what does she say?
Jacqueline had spoken to another officer, Rhonda Curtis, claiming that Rochelle Hanks had made an outcry to her about Micah being physically abusive.
But there is a massive red flag built into the very origin of the complaint. In the official police report, Officer Curtis specifically notes that Jacqueline Eastham explicitly admitted she had not seen any marks on her exterior.
Right. She was initiating a massive law enforcement response based entirely on a claimed outcry, but freely admitted she lacked any physical evidence or firsthand observation of injury to corroborate it.
Still, the police have a legal and moral duty to investigate a claim of family violence. So Officer Worsham, working for the Family Violence Unit, takes the case.
He tries to contact the family at the house on Jackal Drive. He leaves his business card. He coordinates with the CPS investigator, Chris McEwen. He tries to follow up with the informant, Jacqueline Eastham. He does all the legwork required by his department.
And what does all that legwork uncover?
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing that corroborates the extreme allegations of meth, heroin, and starvation.
No. A month later, by September 6, 2022, Officer Worsham updates his formal report. He notes that he received a call from the CPS worker, McEwen. McEwen tells the officer he hasn't been able to make contact with the family either, and mentions he is trying to get a judge to issue a summons.
So neither of them have even seen the family.
Right. Officer Worsham tells the CPS worker to let him know if they manage to make contact, but then Worsham makes a definitive administrative decision on the law enforcement side. He officially marks the Waco Police Department case as unfounded.
Unfounded. I want to read his exact words from the report because they are crucial to everything that happens next. He writes, quote, "This case is still going to be shown as unfounded because we do not have enough information to say an assault had occurred between Rochelle and Micah Hanks."
This creates an incredibly revealing high-stakes friction between the two agencies involved. The police department operates under strict constitutional constraints. They require a legal predicate, tangible evidence, probable cause, or reasonable suspicion that a crime has actually occurred in order to force an intervention or break down a door.
And Child Protective Services operates differently.
Very differently. They act on administrative referrals and operate under family code, which has entirely different thresholds for intervention.
You can see this tension playing out in real time in the dispatch logs. CPS keeps calling the police, requesting armed assistance to enter the home. And the police keep pushing back, essentially saying, well, we don't have the evidence of a crime required to breach this house.
It highlights a major vulnerability in the system. The police are saying they lack the legal authority to act based purely on hearsay, but the administrative machinery of CPS continues to churn forward based on that exact same hearsay.
I mean, just imagine being on the receiving end of this. Think about it. Imagine anonymous or third-party reports containing absolutely no physical evidence triggering this massive government apparatus against your family.
It's terrifying.
It's almost like being swatted. But instead of an angry gamer sending a bomb squad to your house over a video game dispute, someone is sending an agency that has the power to permanently remove your child from your home. And even when the police say, we don't see a crime here, the agency just keeps coming.
And our sources show us exactly what that bureaucratic momentum looks like. We have the actual temporary orders issued by the 74th Judicial District Court in McLennan County. Despite the local police department formally finding the case unfounded, the legal machinery of the state began moving incredibly aggressively against the Hanks family.
I'm looking at the PDFs of these court orders, and they are wild. The court didn't just ask for a welfare check to see if Grace was okay. The orders are sweeping.
Yeah, they go way beyond a welfare check.
They demand that Micah and Rochelle provide comprehensive, detailed medical histories. They demand income tax returns for the past 2 years. They demand current financial statements, bank statements, and pay stubs. They order both parents to submit to immediate drug testing.
There is even a specific provision ordering the parents to potentially pay child support directly to the Department of Family and Protective Services while the case is pending.
Which, if we overlay these court orders with the Jessica Saxton public hearing from Section 1, the overlap is deeply unsettling. From the perspective of the Hanks family, the state wasn't investigating a specific crime of abuse. It was executing a rapid, bureaucratic maneuver to assert total control over their lives, demand deep financial disclosures, and position itself to extract funding.
The court order even includes a demand that the family identify any Native American heritage.
Wait, why Native American heritage? What does that have to do with allegations of meth use or starvation?
It relates to the Indian Child Welfare Act, or ICWA. It determines if a child has Native American status, which triggers entirely different sets of federal jurisdictions, tribal laws, and, yes, federal funding streams.
Oh, wow. So to critics like Saxton, asking about ICWA status on an initial temporary order looks like the state simply checking boxes to maximize its jurisdictional authority and financial avenues.
Exactly. It looks like a fishing expedition for funding.
But wait. We have to pause and ask the most obvious glaring question of this entire deep dive. If the Hanks family truly had absolutely no prior criminal history, if they had never had the police called to their house before this incident, and if the Waco Police Department looked at the informant's claims and officially ruled them unfounded, where on earth did these sudden, highly specific, horrific allegations of meth, heroin, and starvation come from?
Right. Why was Jacqueline Eastham making these claims? To answer that, The source materials pull us sharply away from the cold mechanics of state bureaucracy and pull us into a narrative that honestly sounds like a psychological thriller.
We're going to look at the second definition of a serial kidnapper. We need to talk about the quiverful movement, the theology of the army of God, and the family of origin that Micah Hanks was desperately trying to escape.
Let's turn to the formal psychological evaluation of Micah Hanks. This evaluation was conducted by Dr. Nicole Rivers, a clinical psychologist, and it provides the hidden context for everything happening on Jackal Drive.
So what does Micah tell the psychologist?
During this evaluation, Micah explains the root cause of his current nightmare. He states, point blank, that his involvement with CPS is not random, and it's not based on genuine concern from a neighbor. It is direct, calculated retaliation.
Retaliation from who?
He tells Dr. Rivers that his family of origin operates as a religious cult.
Specifically, he identifies them as operating within the quiverful movement and adhering to an ideology that views them as part of the army of God. And the sources don't just leave us with that broad, vague description.
No, we have a lot more detail.
We actually have access to transcripts of YouTube videos from a channel called Sincerely. These videos are framed as open letters, authored by Micah or someone very close to him, directly addressing his extended family in Illinois.
Specifically naming individuals like Carla J. Hanks, Leonard, Janet, and Catherine Baker.
And the allegations contained within these open letters are basically apocalyptic in scale. The speaker doesn't just accuse them of being strict or abusive parents. They accuse this family group of orchestrating a criminal enterprise spanning over 50 years.
We are talking about allegations of human trafficking, massive systemic fraud, the deliberate cover-up of statutory rape and sexual molestation, and incredibly complex financial crimes.
Yeah, involving hiding properties and money through a labyrinth of trusts, something the letters refer to as TNT hunting.
It paints a picture of a sprawling, deeply corrupt syndicate that uses a veneer of extreme religious piety as a shield.
But the most chilling details in these letters revolve around how they allegedly treat infants and children. The sources describe a child-rearing methodology known as blanket training.
Blanket training is a highly controversial practice, and the sources specifically attribute the methodology to fundamentalist authors Michael and Debbie Pearl.
So what is blanket training exactly? How does it work?
In the context of the source documents, the process is described like this. A parent places an infant, a child who is just learning to move, down on a small blanket. If the infant naturally attempts to crawl off the edge of the blanket, they're immediately struck with an object as a punishment.
Oh my God.
The text even mentions parents actively coaxing the child to come off the blanket, only to physically punish them the moment they cross the boundary.
When I read about placing an infant on a blanket and hitting them for moving, it doesn't sound like discipline. It sounds like operant conditioning, like they were trying to break the fundamental human instinct to explore. What is the psychological goal of doing this to a baby?
Well, from a psychological standpoint, as described in these sources, what's fascinating here is that it is designed to systematically break the will of an infant before they even have language.
Before they can even talk.
Exactly. It is about establishing absolute tyrannical control under the guise of early religious instruction. The goal is to hardwire the idea that any independent thought, any movement outside the strictly defined arbitrary boundary set by the authority figure will result in immediate physical pain.
So it creates an environment where total, unquestioning compliance becomes a basic survival mechanism for the child.
Yes. And according to the sources, this demand for control extends far beyond a blanket in a living room.
Right. The open letters describe a boarding school located in the middle of a desert, 4 hours away from the nearest town. The text says Leonard and Janet took all of their children and abandoned them there, with nobody to protect them but Carla.
And the letters claim Carla was only 13 years old at the time.
A 13-year-old left in charge of a boarding school in the desert.
Yes. The documents allege they didn't just exile their own children, they actively rounded up other people's children and transported them to this isolated desert compound.
The letters speak of children being subjected to sexual abuse out in the middle of nowhere, 100 miles from any kind of help, where they are completely severed from modern society, mandatory reporters, or any standard of care.
This brings us right back to our core theme. This is the second form of serial kidnapping present in our documents. It is the allegation of a shadowy ideological group collecting vulnerable children, isolating them geographically and socially, and enforcing strict compliance through systemic generational abuse.
It's the hoarding of human beings for power and control.
Exactly. And that level of control requires absolute secrecy. It reminds me of the tactics used by an organized crime syndicate. Think about the concept of omerta, the mafia's strict code of silence. You do not speak against the family. You do not expose the family's business to outsiders. You do not leave the family.
And if you do?
The retaliation is absolute and disproportionate. According to the sources, Micah Hanks decided to break omerta.
So what does this all mean for the timeline? Because the timeline is crucial here. The documents state that on Thanksgiving Day, Micah Hanks sat down with a group of about 8 family members. He explicitly stated that he fundamentally disagreed with their treatment of children, that he believed what they were doing was morally wrong and abusive, and therefore he was severing all contact with them.
He drew a line in the sand. He walked away. He managed to escape this fundamentalist, abusive upbringing. He moved across the country to Texas, built a normal life, got married, and had a healthy daughter.
But a group that relies on total control cannot allow a defector to thrive.
No, they can't. When he spoke out, they didn't just argue with him. They allegedly initiated a coordinated, total war against his new life.
And this brings us to the profound tragedy of Micah's situation. He escapes his abusers, only to have his abusers reach out across state lines to destroy him. And they don't do it by sending thugs to his house.
No, they do it by utilizing the very legal system that is theoretically designed to protect victims of abuse.
But there is a specific inciting incident, a single spark that ignited this total war between Micah and the Quiverful cult and directly led to the SWAT raid on Jackal Drive.
Right. To understand why the bureaucracy descended on Texas, we first have to understand the escape of a boy named Jackson in Illinois.
Let's examine the story of Jackson. According to the source documents, Jackson is the adopted son of Carla Hanks. We have an excerpt from an Illinois newspaper, the Wayne County Press, dated December 17, 2020.
The article details a massive, desperate search operation. On a Tuesday evening, Carla J. Hanks reports her adopted juvenile son missing, and the municipal response is huge.
Like they pull out all the stops.
Oh yeah. Multiple fire departments, ambulance crews, emergency management personnel from 2 different counties, and the sheriff's office all deploy to look for this child. They even bring in a drone equipped with thermal imaging to search the rural area in the dark.
Eventually, late that night, a deputy intercepts a local vehicle operator who had found and picked up the boy. Jackson tells authorities he'd been hiding on top of a camper near some abandoned green bins. The poor kid was suffering from exposure to the cold, and emergency services had to transport him to the hospital for possible hypothermia.
But the newspaper article only tells the public, sanitized version of the story. The version where a community comes together to find a lost boy.
But the open letters tell a different story.
Right. The YouTube transcripts and the written notes in our sources reveal a much darker reality about what Jackson allegedly said when he was found. He didn't just get lost looking for a pet or wandering off. He was running for his life.
The sources claim Jackson explicitly told the police officers about the severe mistreatment he was suffering at home. Specifically, that he was being struck with a baseball bat.
A child tells the police he is being beaten with a bat, and yet the sources state his words fell on deaf ears.
How does a child's outcry of physical abuse get entirely dismissed by the authorities who just spent hours searching for him? Like, that blows my mind.
This is where we see a terrifying manipulation of academic credentials. The documents note that Carla Hanks holds a master's degree in child psychology from Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. The allegation is that she weaponized this advanced degree to gaslight the first responders and authorities.
Oh, she uses the language of psychology against them.
Exactly. Instead of a child fleeing a violent home, she frames the situation to the police as a mentally unstable child having a severe psychiatric episode. The sources claim she told them Jackson was mentally unfit. She pathologized his trauma to invalidate his testimony.
And tragically, according to the sources, it worked. The authorities deferred to the credentialed expert, the mother. Instead of investigating the home for abuse, the system institutionalizes the child.
Jackson is placed in a psychiatric facility. The sources refer to a place called Bloomfield Hospital and later a boys' home. He is legally and physically buried in an institution, effectively silencing his claims of abuse.
But Jackson didn't give up. While he was locked in this hospital, he managed to connect with a psychiatrist named Dr. Miller. He pleaded with Dr. Miller to call his big brother, Micah, down in Texas. He just wanted to go live with a safe family member.
And this is the exact moment the trap is sprung. Dr. Miller listens to Jackson and makes the call to Texas. Micah, acting as a protective older brother who knows exactly what Jackson is escaping from, immediately agrees to take him in.
He literally gets in his car and drives all the way from Texas to Illinois to rescue his brother.
And the moment Micah says yes, the moment he proves he is willing to intervene, the cult allegedly mobilizes its ultimate weapon. They realize Micah is about to expose their 50-year history of abuse by saving Jackson and bringing his story to light. So they initiate a massive, coordinated campaign of false reports.
Which brings up the concept of gang stalking.
Right. The concept at play here is known as gang stalking by proxy. The abusive family members in Illinois don't need to physically travel to Texas to attack Micah or intimidate him. They just pick up the phone and call the Department of Child and Family Services. They use the bureaucracy as their hitmen.
One of the sources actually refers to the CPS workers and police as Biden soldiers, highlighting the perception that these agencies function as a mindless, weaponized army acting on the cult's behalf.
It's a very specific phrase that captures that feeling of systemic weaponization.
I want to paint the picture of how absurd and terrifying this situation becomes. Micah arrives at his hotel in Illinois, exhausted from the long drive from Texas. The concierge hands him an envelope along with his room key. Inside is a contact card for a DCFS investigator named Sarah Ivy.
So he knows they're already looking for him.
Right. He goes up to his room, falls asleep, and wakes up to aggressive pounding on his door. It's the authorities, but they aren't there to facilitate the transfer of Jackson.
No, the focus is completely shifted.
Investigator Ivy demands to see Micah's daughter, Grace, who isn't even in the state of Illinois, and asks to search his hotel room. Micah is stunned. He says, "You guys called me. I traveled all the way here from Texas because Dr. Miller called me about Jackson. Why are you asking about my daughter?"
And the investigator replies, "We have reports that you are making and selling heroin and methamphetamine."
It's a complete, bewildering ambush. Micah immediately realizes he's been set up. He tries to explain the context to the investigator. He tells her about his family, about Jackson being beaten, about the cult's history of retaliation.
And the source document says, with an evil look in her eye, she just smiled.
Micah realizes in that moment that she doesn't care about the complex truth of his family dynamic. She just has an open file containing buzzwords like meth and heroin, and she needs to act on it. So he kicks her out of his room.
But the nightmare is happening on two fronts simultaneously, because right after he forces the investigator out of his Illinois hotel room, his phone rings.
It's his wife, Rochelle.
Yeah, calling from back home in Texas. She is completely distraught. While Micah was being ambushed in Illinois, child protective workers and local police had been beating on the door of their home in Lorena.
Rochelle is terrified.
Yeah.
She tells Micah, "I'm not losing my daughter because your mother is a psychopath and believes she can take a person's child away just for disagreeing with her." And this raises such an important, horrifying question for us to consider about how our society is structured. How vulnerable are our state agencies to being used as literal hitmen for personal vendettas?
If the algorithms of child protection are built entirely on reacting to anonymous or third-party reports, without a rigorous initial filter for malicious intent or historical context, the system becomes an open API for sociopaths.
The tragic irony here is profound. The state system, ostensibly designed to catch serial abusers and kidnappers, is allegedly being manipulated by serial abusers to kidnap a 9-year-old girl from a perfectly safe home.
And this bureaucratic weaponization isn't just a matter of stressful paperwork or annoying phone calls. It inevitably, tragically, leads to physical confrontation. When endless paper trails meet the real world, things get violent.
This entire saga culminates in a literal siege on Jackal Drive.
We can track the climax of this conflict minute by minute using the Waco Police Department and McLennan County Sheriff's dispatch logs from September 15th, 2022. The system has decided it has enough administrative authority to act, despite the local Waco police previously ruling the underlying allegations unfounded.
The log entry at 19.37.17 is chilling. It reads, "Deputies assisted CPS with a writ of attachment on a 9-year child." We need to clearly define that. What is a writ of attachment in the context of family law?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a writ of attachment is a highly aggressive, extraordinary court order. It authorizes law enforcement to physically seize a person or property, in this specific case, to take physical custody of Grace Hanks and deliver her to the Department of Family and Protective Services.
So they are coming to take her by force.
Yes. It is the state asserting its ultimate unilateral authority to break a family apart based on the evidence presented to a judge, usually in an ex parte hearing where the parents aren't even present to defend themselves.
But remember the context. Micah and Rochelle know they are innocent. They know the reports are malicious lies generated by an abusive cult trying to punish them for helping Jackson. So when heavily armed county deputies show up at their front door with a piece of paper demanding their daughter, they make a terrifying, desperate choice.
The dispatch log notes, when deputies explained why they were there, both Rochelle and Micah refused to comply with the order and refused entry.
The logs continue, noting that both parents were explicitly warned that warrants for their arrest could be issued for interfering. But the Hanks family held their ground. The source documents describe them physically barricading the doors of their home against the police.
And a later log entry from September 21st, referencing the events of the 15th, notes that the homeowners threatened to use the castle doctrine.
This is a massive legal collision. Let's explain the castle doctrine for a second, because this is huge in Texas. This is a fundamental concept in Texas law and in many other states. It essentially asserts that your home is your castle, and you have a legal right to use force, up to and including deadly force, to protect your home and your family from unlawful entry or attack.
This moment on Jackal Drive represents the absolute breaking point of civil society. It is a collision of two immense, opposing, and seemingly immovable legal realities. On one side, you have the state executing a writ of attachment backed by the badge, the gun, and the authority of a judge, acting on an administrative mandate to protect a child.
And on the other side,
you have a citizen invoking fundamental constitutional property and self-defense rights, claiming the state's entry is fundamentally unlawful because it is based on fraudulent pretenses and perjury.
the YouTube open letters describe the absolute horror of that moment. The text talks about Rochelle climbing out of the bathtub from hearing the sound of her house being torn down as the deputies make their way through a home, kicking in the door.
It describes a full-blown SWAT-style raid, with deputies treating the suburban family like hardened cartel members.
The situation escalates exactly as you would expect when an immovable object meets an unstoppable force. The state will not back down. The sources indicate that the door was breached and Micah was eventually arrested. And the trauma of that arrest is stark. The letters claim officers threatened him with death during the raid or told him he was going to a Mexican prison.
Imagine being in Micah's position. You escape a cult, you build a beautiful, quiet life. The cult decides to frame you for making heroin. You try to tell the police, hey, we're being targeted by a syndicate, please look into this context.
But the system ignores your context, kicks in your front door, rips your terrified child away from you, and arrests you.
Right. Do you submit to a system that has entirely catastrophically failed you, hoping it eventually sorts itself out in a courtroom months later while your child sits in foster care? Or do you fight back in your doorway and risk being killed by law enforcement right in front of your family?
It is an impossible nightmare scenario. It's a choice no citizen should ever have to make. But the Hanks family did fight back. However, ultimately, they didn't fight back with violence. They fought back with the law.
The fallout from this raid initiated a massive, highly sophisticated legal counterattack. Our sources include documents titled Formal Evidence Preservation and Litigation Hold Notices.
Yes, Micah Hanks sent these out almost immediately after the dust settled. He blanketed the agencies involved. He sent them to the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, the Office of Inspector General, the McLennan County Sheriff's Department, the Waco Police Department, and the county clerk. What does a litigation hold actually do?
A litigation hold is a legal directive sent to an organization instructing them to preserve all relevant data and records that might relate to pending or reasonably anticipated litigation. By sending these, Micah is legally demanding they preserve every single record, every email, every radio communication, and every piece of internal data related to their investigations into his family.
It prevents the agencies from accidentally or intentionally deleting the paper trail.
Exactly. And this is where we see the immense power of the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, in this story. The family didn't just complain on YouTube or protest outside a courthouse. They
argue that because the initial CPS warrants were allegedly based on fabricated information, which is verified by the local police department's own internal notes, the entire subsequent raid, the kicking in of the door, the seizure of Grace, was fundamentally illegal.
In their legal view, it wasn't a lawful execution of a warrant. It constitutes false arrest, aggravated assault, and official oppression by the officers and agents involved.
This circles us all the way back to the warning given by Jessica Saxton in Section 1. She warned those county commissioners about the dangers of rubber-stamp justice. She warned about judges signing orders without a preponderance of evidence purely to feed a system.
Because if the state's own law enforcement records show that abuse was investigated and ruled out by local police, how does a judge, weeks later, sign a writ of attachment authorizing armed men to kick in a family's door?
The systemic failure here, if the allegations hold, is breathtaking.
It truly is. We've covered an immense amount of ground today, and the complexity of these documents is just dizzying.
It is, and I think it's time to bring it all together. Over the course of this deep dive, we've navigated the harrowing journey contained within this massive stack of sources. We set out to explore the concept of serial kidnappers, and we found two chilling, overlapping realities.
We examined the macro-level accusation of a federal funding machine built on Title IV grants that critics allege incentivizes the destruction of fit families for county profit, utilizing the mechanics of RICO and misprision of felony to maintain its grip.
And we examined the micro-level horror of a multi-generational quiverful cult alleged to hoard children in desert compounds, enforce compliance through blanket training, and destroy anyone who dares to defect.
And caught in the absolute dead center of the crossfire between this allegedly abusive cult and this massive, unyielding state bureaucracy is Grace Hanks, a 9-year-old girl whose home on Jackal Drive was subjected to a literal siege.
The reason this matters to you, the listener, the reason we spent this time unpacking these definitions, is because this is not just a bizarre true crime anomaly that happens to other people. This narrative exposes the terrifying fragility of parental rights and civil liberties in the modern era.
It demonstrates how easily the well-intentioned algorithms of child protection can be hacked. When a malicious actor learns the right buzzwords to feed the system words like meth, heroin, abuse, they can turn the shield of the state into a sword and swing it directly at the innocent.
It's a system built on anonymous tips and administrative referrals, operating in a reality where bad people know exactly how to manipulate the paperwork to achieve their own dark ends. Which leaves us with a final, deeply unsettling thought for you to mull over as we end this deep dive.
What's the final thought?
Well, from the time we are toddlers, we are trained to scream for help if we are in danger. We are told to look for a police officer, to look for a social worker, to seek out the safety of the government. But if the bureaucracy's intelligence relies solely on whoever files the report first, and the sociopaths are the ones filling out the paperwork, who do you scream for when the rescuer becomes the kidnapper?